Potting up transplants allows me to straddle garden seasons. I have okra seeded in pots right now to fill in after I harvest my potatoes. My kale and greens are still growing strong, so I'm keeping peppers, eggplant, and tomatoes in pots to grow until the kale and other greens are harvested. I'll put this tomato in a 4-inch pot and a 1-gallon pot, and sometimes even pot them up into a 5-gallon pot until they're ready to go into the garden. Now, basil, parsley, and other herbs are sometimes really crowded in their pots. This little pot right here has 5 basil plants in it, and if I were to plant that in the garden, it just would not do well. So I will pull this out of the pot and very gently tear these apart. You don't want to handle the stems too roughly. And then I'll pot them back up in more 4-inch pots and give them a chance to recover from the shock before I set them out in the garden. And you might even want to trim some of the tops back to help them rebound from stress. Now, when it's time to repot, plants will stop growing. You'll see roots tightly coiled around the base of the plant, maybe even extending from the pot. Maybe the plants are just too spread in the pot and are too crowded. You don't want to move up into too large of a pot. 1 or 2 inches wider and deeper is about right, unless it's a plant like a tomato that you're going to leave in a pot and it's going to get very, very large, or a hibiscus, for example. Spring is a good time for repotting your indoor plants as the plants are really actively growing. It's a good idea to wash old pots with a 10% bleach solution and then rinse them well. If you're using terracotta pots, it's a good idea to water them well before you plant. I like to use a light potting soil, something that's very high quality and drains well. Soilless potting mixes are best for indoor plants only, as they really dry out too quickly outdoors. I do reuse old potting soil. I just add new soil to the top of the pot and add compost to it too, and I'll loosen the soil that's in the pot if it's caked or hard. I'll also take old potting soil and put it in the bottom of very large pots and then put new soil in at the top. If you are concerned about weeds or diseases in old potting soil, you can put it in a black garbage bag, a covered garbage can, or a large covered plastic container and leave it on the driveway or a sunny area for a few days to solarize it. I'm not a fan of cooking soil in my kitchen appliances to kill diseases. It gets really smelly. It only needs to get to about 140 degrees to kill most pathogens and weeds. Now, I do use a piece of fiberglass screening over the hole in the bottom of my pots, and this is available at the hardware stores. That will keep out ants and scorpions and other critters out of your containers, but you don't really need to use pot shards or anything like that. Put a little potting soil in there to start with, and then if you've got a plant that's just really too crowded, it's a good idea to water it a few days in advance so that it's not too dry when you start this process. And you can see this is just really full of roots and needs to be divided. These two plants are just not, the leaves are very, very small. It's just not looking great. So you just gently tease these plants apart. They're pretty fibrous. If you tear any roots, you might want to do some trimming and pruning to get rid of any thing that you've torn. And then just set that into the pot and put fresh potting soil around it, and make sure that you're firming that soil to get out air pockets. You can use a chopstick or even a dibble like this for tight places. If you're doing cactus or spiny things, a tightly rolled newspaper will allow you to pick that up, or you can use a pair of kitchen tongs to handle the cactus during repotting. Once you repot, make sure that you water, make sure the water is coming out of the drain holes, and then keep that plant out of direct sun for a few days and wait several weeks to fertilize. And your pots will all look fresh and new, and your plants will look great. For Backyard Basics, I'm Trisha Shirey.